All right, for this explainer, we are digging up a story from 1990s Haryana that was almost completely lost to time. Now, this isn't your typical ghost story, but trust me, it is absolutely a horror story.
See, the real horror here isn't some spirit or a demon. It's a poison that is all too human: greed. So forget about the supernatural for a minute. What we're about to get into is a chilling look at what happens when that simple desire for more turns deadly.
Our story kicks off not with the main character, but with the supposed terror of a very loyal employee.
So to really get what happened, let's meet the key players. First, you've got Raghav Malik, a super successful businessman out of Delhi. Then there's his wife, Mohini. They own this remote farmhouse in Haryana, kind of their weekend getaway spot. And looking after that farmhouse is our fourth player, a caretaker named Raju.
And this is absolutely crucial. Raju wasn't just some guy they hired. He had been Raghav's loyal caretaker for 10 years, a full decade. Raghav trusted this man completely.
The whole thing starts with a single panicked phone call. Raju calls Raghav in an absolute state, just total terror, saying something is terribly, terribly wrong at the farmhouse. He tells his boss he can barely breathe, he's so scared, that he feels like death itself is standing right in front of him.
Now, a call like that is enough to make anyone drop everything, right? So Raghav drives out to Haryana. He thinks he's just going to solve some simple problem, but instead he walks straight into a nightmare of his own.
When Raghav gets there, the whole vibe is just off. It's dead silent. Normally, Raju would be at the gate to meet him, maybe some music playing, but this time, nothing. The house is empty. He eventually finds Raju, get this, cowering and trembling in the animal stable. Raghav is, of course, totally confused and asks what is going on, and Raju tells him this terrifying story from the night before. He claims that after the lights went out, he saw it. The ghost, he says, it was a tall woman with no head.
Raghav is skeptical, but he agrees to stay the night. And that's when it all goes sideways for him, too. First, he hears this creepy, disembodied laughter. Then, at exactly 9 p.m., boom, the power cuts out, just like some letter from the electric company had supposedly warned. He's spooked, decides he's leaving, but his car keys, they vanished. He's trapped. He ends up confronting some figure in the dark kitchen, and the shock is so bad that Raghav, who has a known heart condition, just faints cold. He wakes up hours later, around 2:50 a.m., to the sound of a voice on the phone, a voice that's about to change everything.
And this right here, this is the pivot. This is the exact moment the ghost story completely shatters, and the ugly, ugly truth of a human conspiracy, a deeply personal betrayal, comes crawling into the light.
Lying there on the cold floor, pretending he's still passed out, Raghav just listens to the man talking in the dark. So, who do you think was making that call? It was Raju, his loyal, terrified caretaker. And he was on the phone, reporting to an accomplice that their plan had failed. Raghav had only fainted. The scare wasn't enough to trigger the fatal heart attack they were hoping for. The headless woman, the laughter, the missing keys, it was all an act. A whole performance by Raju designed to literally scare his boss to death. But he wasn't working alone. So who was on the other end of that line? Who was his accomplice?
It was Raghav's own wife, Mohini.
Let's just break this down, because it is ice cold. Mohini was the mastermind. Also, she could inherit her husband's massive fortune. Raju was the actor, playing his part to scare Raghav to death. And what was his payment for betraying a decade of trust? A measly 5% of the property, which included the farmhouse he'd always wanted.
But Mohini and Raju made one fatal miscalculation. They saw Raghav as a victim. They had no idea that he was a far, far better manipulator than they could ever hope to be. And now, the story shifts to Raghav's own plan. The second the lights come back on at 3 a.m., Raghav is up like a flash. He grabs a kitchen knife, presses it right to Raju's throat. Just like that, the intended victim becomes the predator. All that fear from before, gone, replaced by this chilling, terrifying calm.
And Raghav lays out this simple, brutal counterplot. First, he makes Raju call Mohini and lure her out to the farmhouse, telling her the job is done. Second, he flips the pawn. He offers Raju a better deal. Forget 5%, how about 10% of the property? And third, the order. The price for this new, better deal? Kill Mohini the second she walks through that door.
Okay, let's get to the final act and see how this all builds to the story's ultimate, absolutely devastating deception. Well, fueled by the promise of a much bigger reward, Raju makes his choice.
He opens the door for his partner in crime, Mohini, and as she steps inside, expecting to claim her new inheritance, he stabs her, killing her right there on the spot. Raju turns to Raghav, the bloody knife still in his hand, ready to claim his 10%. But Raghav just looks down at his dead wife, smiles, and delivers the final soul-crushing twist. He tells Raju, "I sold this farmhouse a week ago."
Can you believe it? The entire scheme, the betrayal, the conspiracy, the murder, it was for a prize that didn't even exist. The farmhouse they just killed for no longer belonged to Raghav. The only reason he was even there that night was to pack up his last few things. And Raghav gets away with all of it. The official story that hits the news is a simple, tragic crime of passion. The caretaker and the wife were having an affair, he killed her, and then, overcome with guilt, took his own life. The reality, though, was a masterfully orchestrated triple cross for nothing, engineered by a man who perfectly understood and exploited the greed of his wife and his most trusted employee.
And that leaves us with one final haunting question. This whole story shows how a simple desire for more, for a 5% stake, then 10%, spiraled into betrayal and murder. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? At what point does a little bit of greed become a fatal poison?